So this Daylong today is, well, I guess I could say, dedicated or um, in response to some letters from someone named Dustin, who has really been appreciating the Dhamma recordings. And so this is a great thank you to the whole Dhamma sharing team. And we've had a little correspondence, and in the process of that, I asked him if he had a Dhamma theme he'd like to hear about. So he, at that time, was studying the Itivuttaka, which is one of the small books in the Khuddaka Nikaya, the fifth Nikaya. And we've talked about it before. These are the teachings of the Buddha that were heard by this woman named Kujatara, and she was sent out by the queen from the palace and the women's court, which was pretty much I don't know, they weren't allowed to leave the palace, these ladies in general, but she would go out and buy flowers. And in the process, she was also bringing back the teachings of the Buddha for all of them to learn. And that's this collection of teachings that were preserved by her, or established by her. And so in that, Dustin was observing that there was a lot of mention of the three, what's often called the three poisons, greed, hatred, and delusion. And his request was for a talk about that and how do we overcome those. And of course, it's a very fundamental approach to our situation of suffering, where, you know, regardless of the words in Pali, the exact words which get used, or the English translations, it's basically greed or desire, maybe lust, whatever it is that causes us to want to draw something towards us, something we want, which is ultimately suffering, whether we realize it or not. And then there's the aversion side, whether we call it aversion or hatred. And that's that pushing away, wanting to get rid of, not wanting it to be the way it is. And then the delusion part, some kind of confusion or misunderstanding or misapprehension of the way things are. So I'm going to share some suttas, and just brief ones to really reflect on this the experience we have. And this comes from the Itivuttaka, one of the many suttas referring to greed, hatred, and delusion, or greed and aversion and delusion. And this translation is Bhante Sujato's. And the sutta is called Fire. This was said by the Buddha, the perfected one. That is what I heard. Mendicants, there are these three fires. What three? The fires of greed, hate, and delusion. These are the three fires. The Buddha spoke this matter, and on this it is said, the fire of greed burns a mortal, lustful, infatuated by sensual pleasures, while fallen in the fire of hate, a person kills living creatures. And bewildered by the fire of delusion, they miss the teaching of the noble ones. Not recognizing these three fires, people are caught up in substantial reality. They fill the ranks of hell, of birth as an animal, or of titans and ghosts, not freed from Mara's bonds. But as to those committed day and night to the teaching of the Buddha, they quench the fire of greed, always perceiving ugliness. While those supreme persons quench the fire of hate with love, and the fire of delusion with wisdom that leads to penetration. Having quenched these fires, alert, tireless all day and night, they become completely quenched, completely transcending suffering. Seers of the noble truths, knowledge masters, the astute, understanding rightly, directly know the ending of rebirth, they come not back to future lives. This too is a matter that was spoken by the Blessed One. That is what I heard. So in this short sutta, we see the clues of how to deal with these three. When we're committed day and night, let's see, I kind of can highlight this. Committed day and night to the teaching of the Buddha, they quench the fire of greed, always perceiving ugliness. So the fundamental approach to dealing with desire is to look at the downside. That's really, what helps us if we're really craving something, we want to have something, realizing the downside. So I've got another little sutta here. Greed, desire, and lust. What do we do with it? So this is from the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Threes, 103. And this is something the Buddha said about his time before he became enlightened, before his awakening. So mendicants, before my awakening, when I was still unawakened, but intent on awakening. So I think that probably is most of us, maybe all of us here. I'm not going to make any assumptions about your levels of understanding, but we're probably on the path somewhere trying to wake up. And this is what was true of the Buddha too, before his enlightenment. And he thought, what's the gratification in the world? What's the drawback? What's the escape? Sometimes the way this is translated is, what is the gratification, the danger, and the escape? And it's that if we want to deal with our desire to have something, or be something, or do something that brings suffering and stress, not all desire brings suffering and stress. Desire for peace, desire for harmony. I mean, we can feel stressful if we're attached and it's not there. We can feel stressed, but these are actually really good things to work for, to reach for, to practice. But most of the time, when we're talking about the kind of dukkha that arises, it's because we're wanting something that's actually going to bring more trouble into our life, even though we think this is a great thing, right? So, it's based on the attachment. It's not the thing itself. There's no inherent problem with what we find in the world. I mean, there's some explanation that should go with that. You want to be sure we know what the wholesome things are and what the unwholesome things are. But ordinary sense input, like, the sounds or the smells or the tastes or, the sights, the things we see, ordinarily, when it sparks our desires, the thing itself isn't the problem. It's our craving. It's our desires for it that causes trouble. But when the Buddha, when he's, looking at what is it that we want from the world, what is it that we find gratifying in the world? And he says, it occurred to me the pleasure and happiness that arise from the world. This is the gratification. That the world is impermanent, suffering, and perishable. So it's like, it's impermanent. It's not stable. It's not reliable. Because of that, we suffer, we experience dukkha. It's perishable, it's not going to last, is a constant changing involved in it. This is the drawback, or this is the danger of getting attached. Removing and giving up desire and greed for the world, this is the escape. And then he says, as long as I didn't truly understand the world's gratification, drawback, and escape in this way for what they are, I didn't announce my supreme perfect awakening in this world with its devas, maras, brahmas, population of ascetics and brahmins, its devas and humans. But when I did truly understand the world's gratification, drawback, and escape in this way for what they are, then I announced my supreme perfect awakening. So it's like he wouldn't be able to rightly claim being awake if he didn't understand this. And this, so we have to, we can take that as an important encouragement to understand it for ourselves, besides the fact that this is what helps us to reduce our suffering dramatically, to be able to see the downside, the challenge, the difficulty, the loss that comes when we want something and we assume it to belong to us or to be us. And then, of course, it isn't, and it falls apart. So then he said, the knowledge and vision arose in me. My freedom is unshakable. This is my last birth. Now there be no more future lives. So how does this work in practice? And maybe you have examples from your own life, from your practice of, being caught up in desire for something. Okay. Being caught up in desire for something and then recognizing its reality. It's not like we lose track of the beautiful side of it, but we also then see the other side, the ugly side, the dangerous part. Anybody want to share an example? It's like, yes, Paul.
I'm quite fascinated by all the fire simile that the Buddha had, and I feel like people, even if they don't know about the Dhamma, they can feel that greed and hatred. It's kind of like fire, like when you say somebody's like hot, like
yeah,
or they say like somebody is hot tempered,
yes,
as in they're angry, like in a sense, like we know that it's fire, but like we kind of enjoy it. So
it's true. We can feel powerful with that fire raging. We can feel excited, passionate. I've told this story maybe before, but I remember I used to go to Thailand every year, at least once or twice a year, and my mother would go with me. And one year I went early to also go to India, to Bodh Gaya. And my mom really needed some support to come over to Thailand to meet me there later. And one of my good friends, her name was Susan, we kind of, my mom just invited her to come along to be kind of her attendant to come over. And Susan was, sort of, she's interested in Buddhism, but, pretty solidly Christian. And she enjoyed her time. And one of the questions that she had, or what she said to me at one point was, but I want passion in my life. And then, I was talking with, I asked Ajahn Pasano about, you can understand that, there's this idea that we want this excitement. We want to have these feelings of kind of liking the feeling of desire, this passion for something. And when I said to Ajahn Pasano, she wants passion in her life, and he said, well, she can have passion in her life and all the suffering that comes with it. and it's like that, it's like we want the good feeling part, the part that's energizing, or the part that's gratifying when we get what we want. But then, there's always that crash on the other side of it. And I know what you mean, Huang, by this fire simile. It's like the mind can be hot, the heart can be on fire, and then, what do we really want? The Buddha said, think about nibbana as happiness. Think about peace and tranquility. Like this is happiness. This is real happiness. Neil?
Yeah, I often think of this as a battle between the craving, the beautiful side of the craving, the passion, the deliciousness. I mean, if I use a specific example of a real simple example of food, certain foods that I really love so much that I eat too much of it in one sitting, and I know I'm going to feel sick afterwards, but it's when will be the turn where I realize that the beauty, like right now, I would say the pleasure outweighs the downside, and I don't, and as I'm doing it, I'm aware, I'm totally aware that this pleasure is only going to bring suffering, but I don't care right now because because the pleasure is the known quantity, you know. And so, I mean, this is just what I'm thinking. It's not really a question, I guess, but how do you because that's one simple example, but there are lots of other things that I could talk about that I won't talk about that are similar. That is a similar experience where I wonder if this was what was meant in the first reading. There was a phrase substantial reality, and I wasn't sure if that meant like our mundane reality where we're addicted to substances, or if it was some other meaning that I didn't understand. But looking at it that way, it's like right now for me, the substantial reality just seems to be the one that I want.
Yeah. And the substantial reality is Bhante Sujato's translation, and I think it is about the world. It's like this material world. This is what we're most engaged with. And the way to, being able to acknowledge that what you're eating tastes good, not a problem. It's fine to whoever made it or where it came from, the cherries we had, the dark cherries we had at breakfast this morning, to acknowledge the goodness in it, but to not be attached to it. And how do we do that? It's by building up more and more of the spiritual happiness, that experience, so much more refined and uplifting and nourishing to the heart. And so it's in comparison. And it's like the passion gets reduced because there's always the downside in the substantial reality. And even, it's really noticing, like I said, not so much about the object, it's about how we relate to it. If we relate to our spiritual experiences with greed, we still have trouble. But if we relate to it more as the immersion of our whole being into this spiritual reality of peace and contentment and those various kinds of joy and happiness that are described, the piti, the sukha, the pamoja, the good feeling we have when we're being generous and kind, when we're really pervading the entire mind with one of the Brahma Viharas or more than one at a time. Kind of they blend together sometimes. To really like bring that more into the center stage of our life. It reduces the fire. And we come to more peace. And then we don't fight. If you think about it, Ajahn Gana would say that people are fighting for the garbage, for the rubbish, gets translated by the last time when we were there, Klung translating in her kind of British English, and it's like, yeah, what is all the conflict about? It's about this. It's the greed or the hatred. If we really look at where things lead, we're more circumspect. We appreciate the things that bring harmony, happiness, kindness, generosity, true wealth. Carolyn? Are you there, Carolyn? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ayya. I was thinking about that sutta about the higher happiness and the wise person choosing the higher happiness. I don't remember what sutta that is, but that's what this made me think of. And then also, I'm so familiar with that, like wanting the thing so much that you're actually hurting yourself or taking more of it. And I was thinking when I was much younger, I read a book. I think it was written in the 1800s, called All Passion Spent, and it was basically about a person becoming old and realizing like all those passions that I had, it's like just done with that, and I've had relationships where like I thought this was going to be the person that I would be with the rest of my life. And it's like, and it always ended up like not being satisfying, like one relationship after another. It just like the promise in the beginning, it was like, and maybe people who have long-term, good relationships, it's different. But for me, it was just like, yeah, okay, I tried that again and it still doesn't work. And it doesn't really satisfy what it is that I was really wanting. So the last breakup that I had, I decided I'm just going to take relationships for a while. And then I realized like, wow, I feel so much more peaceful and calm, And then when the pandemic hit and all the Dhamma stuff came online, it was like, oh, it was so satisfying. It was like, oh, this is what I really wanted, And so then I became clear, okay, I'm just not going to do the relationship thing again because it was really distracting me from my path, because I've been on a Dhamma path for like 29 years, but I just kept getting distracted, by this relationship or that relationship with people who were not practicing. So maybe, that probably would help if someone's on the path with their partner. But anyway, that's what I wanted to say. And if you remember that sutta, I would love the reference for it. The higher.
Yeah, I don't know it offhand. It's a kind of thing that you see frequently. I think it's in more places in the suttas, choosing that higher happiness. And it's interesting thinking about this in terms of relationships, because if we really go into a relationship with, as my mom used to say, with your eyes wide open, then we already are looking at the drawbacks, and we're looking at, in this relationship, are these two people more stable together than apart? Are they more able to develop themselves? A lot of times having a relationship, a close relationship, a committed relationship, is more beneficial than to be alone. But it's not always the case, as you're saying. And if what we're looking for in a relationship, like sometimes, I remember when I was practicing as a minister before coming to Buddhism and becoming a nun, I married some couples and performed officiated for a funeral or so, and things like that. And when you see couples coming together and you don't really have that much of a connection with them as an official for the wedding, you kind of see the way they're relating to each other. And I remember this one ceremony where the groom was talking about how, she completes him, and this is, like this kind of stuff. And I just was kind of worried about them, it's like, if you think that this person is going to really fill that, what we can think of as this hole in our heart where we're longing for some kind of completion, we're probably going to be disappointed. And it's easy to go down that track many times and recognize that, if what we're looking for is actually a partnership that allows us to work through the things that we ourselves are needing to learn and to develop, and to also support the other person in doing the same thing. We're both interested, if both people are interested in learning and growing. And it doesn't, it's like every couple is different, but looking at what are the benefits of this partnership? What are the benefits of this relationship? And can we make this relationship something that's beneficial for both? Or if we're looking for, some kind of utopian existence because this other person is so awesome, we're probably not yet seeing the whole person. And we might not be seeing ourselves completely either, and what we're bringing into a relationship. So it's an interesting area to notice our delusions and our cravings, and work through those in order to really have a happy, healthy relationship. Steve?
Yeah, thank you. I had a cousin several years ago who started meditating and then said that he had to stop because it was messing up his job. He didn't have enough fire anymore. And that was kind of the, for myself, one of the things I really appreciate about the teachings is that it has helped me to learn when I'm starting to get triggered into these things earlier, and I kind of have the guarding the sense doors that I can pull in and practice a little renunciation and stay away from social media and not watch debates. Although even with even when you don't watch it, you hear about it, and I I could actually experience kind of a physical heat that comes up with when you hear different lies or things. So and kind of being able to tune into those physical cues and things, so that you pull back and yeah, like your talk about the higher happiness. Let let go of those fiery things. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, dropping them like hot coals.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that we, just crawl into our hole and block out the world either. But to, that's obviously we're practicing being in the world, understanding the world for what it is. And like you said, we feel the cues or the clues. We recognize, oh yeah, this is there's some danger here. You feel the heating up, and then of course to focus on the ugliness, and obviously that's the prime kind of antidote to the passions and the cravings, like to really see what it's bringing along with it. And there's also, in the example that you're giving, when we come back to wisdom, as well as a cooling of the heart, then we also can recognize what it is that we can do to try to make things better, and what it is that we cannot do, and how to let go of the craving for something we can't actually affect. Sometimes the karma is really strong. Things take their course. We have to put in the effort we can put in to see if we can make things better. But then, yeah.
Roll with it.
Say something. Yeah,
Thanks.
Aditi. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, my question was, when it's like something like a big fire, it's easy to kind of recognize it, but there is this subtle force of our preferences, which can really bring in a lot of entrapment, and even knowing the Dharma, having a practice, understanding in the moment, like we hold back our love, our compassion, because of our preferences. Other people treat us based on our karma, and we are supposed to treat them with all the love, and we can't, because the preference pulls back the love. So I'm wondering how to work with that.
Well, seeing it first of all, like if we know we have these preferences, and it's conditioning, it's from the past. It's like if we're really looking at something without our conditioning having so much influence, then we see with wisdom what's wholesome and unwholesome. And that's the way we like divide things. It's like, okay, we want to associate with and move in the direction of the wholesome. And if it's something unwholesome, the Buddha says, yeah, it's reasonable to feel disgust about that. So, but you're doing it because you can see the difference between what's wholesome and unwholesome, not just because of our preferences, like you're saying, not just because you're conditioned to feel a certain way about a certain person or a kind of, like category or group of people or whatever, not because you just, the past conditioning, you're used to what's familiar, perhaps, it's like, and you're not so inclined to be open and accepting and loving of what's unfamiliar or what's in our culture, what's in one's own individual culture or enculturation or conditioning acceptable. But if we can so working with that is we see it. We see this is the preference. This is what was comfortable and familiar in my experience growing up or whatever in my social group. But then if we start to see things based on what's wholesome and unwholesome, instead of those preferences, then we can make clearer decisions about what to support, what to associate with, how to, and even if what people are doing is unwholesome, there's an appropriate, really Brahma Vihara for that, like there's compassion, equanimity, but it doesn't come from that like preferences, and it doesn't come from a sense of self. Because when we're operating out of our preferences, we're operating out of the sense of self. That's what we're taking as the basis. But if we take the Dhamma as the basis, then we're dealing much more with, okay, what really is beneficial, what's wholesome, what do we want to promote, and what do we want to encourage? And it's also wholesome to have compassion and understanding for what people are doing and the choices they're making that are unwholesome. And yet we keep ourselves separate enough from that to not fall into it ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But I just realized that we might lose some friends and relatives in the meantime while we are making our way from acting out of sense of self to acting out of dharma.
We might, hopefully not through our own lack of skill, but through the fact that we just don't associate so much with people who are kind of driven to the unwholesome and want to continue to stay in that. So it's like we may pull away. We may not have the same friends anymore. Possibly. Matthew?
Kind of piggybacking on that really is at the very mundane level, I feel like greed often robs us of our pleasure and enjoyment of the thing anyway. Because like, Neil was talking about food, it's starting to be fruit season, and are you excited about the idea of a peach? Or are you going to be able to eat this peach and enjoy this peach? Right? It's in relationships. Can you enjoy your time with this person? Or are you living out a fantasy in your head that when they violate that vision of who I see them to be and they refuse to just conform to my fantasy, that I've now ruined this relationship? That, all of those things that, do have the good, I think that sometimes it's not, like you said, it's not the object. It is this fantasy, it is this story that has been built, and it just gets back into that idea that the good gets destroyed by the vision of the perfect and the inability to just be here in the now. I'm a psychologist, and so I work with a lot of folks that their issue is not about not seeing the bad in the good, it's the just seeing all the bad. But the same kind of thing is that it's all here now. Like all of that is present. And so are you responding to your fantasy about the here and now and about the world at large and about the people around you? Or are you responding to what's here? Because if you respond to what's here, the opposite of that is also present. And that shifts how you feel, that shifts your emotional state, and ultimately shifts your brain. So.
Yeah, if we really love someone, we're seeing them as they are. And it's not, I mean, a lot of times I think we feel like we're in love with someone. We're not even really, it's not about that person at all. We're not seeing them at all. If we really see them, we see their conditioning, their weaknesses, their strengths, and we want what's best for them. And if we really love someone and they're more happy with someone else, then we're like, okay, go be happy. Because if we really love, there's no attachment, which is not that easy to, develop, but it is the path we're on, to really have that kind of unconditional, selfless love. Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Mira?
Well, I did watch the debate, and it was really interesting because I'm really a person who is an anger type and who has lived a lot of my life in that kind of anger and fire and right and been out there in this way and that way. And I didn't get that aggravated. And it was really, it was a very aggravating 90 minutes on so many levels. It was really horrible and sad. And it was an incredible display of delusion and greed, and hatred of all. I was just seeing that continuously. And I did get pulled into like wanting to read what people were saying after. So I got pulled in more, but I didn't get so worked up in this way that I could. And that was really interesting. And then the same thing, like this is Pride weekend, and there's a lot of organizing around, no pride while genocide, because of Gaza and Israel and stuff. And I was like, and there's this big gathering or march or something like is going to happen. And I thought, well, no, I'm not going to go to that because I already read the tone of it. I'm like, oh, this is just going to fuel the anger in a really intensive way that I don't want to or activate in myself, even though I want to continue to be responsive to the situation. I feel really strongly about wanting to be responsive to the situation, but not like that. So it's been interesting for me to notice those tendencies that have been so strong in me, that have so much self and so much righteous heat, anger to it, are much cooler. And then when I've talked to some people and they're getting working it up, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to work it up. Like, it's just not where I want to go about it. And so I've been doing that some this week. And
it's great.
That's been really interesting for me in terms of the fiery thing we're talking about.
Thank you, Mira. That's great. And 2 weeks of retreat probably helped.
I think so.
And to see the difference is so valuable. And, we've been hearing it with other people sharing too. You see the difference in yourself, like when we were at a place in our development where the passions just run, and now to really get the taste of this is peaceful, this is sublime, the stilling of all formations, the letting go of all attachments, the ending of craving. It's like, and then yes, the next part is that there's the fading away, the cessation, nibbana. So this process, this, taking that in, when we start to get those indications, like Steve was talking about, when you start to feel it coming up, or you're watching something like the debate, and or like you said, listening to people who are starting to go down that path of revving it up and getting really fired up, fire, heat, burning. Are we going to burn ourselves down again and again? Or, let it go?
It's really interesting to choose to not fuel it in that way, but still have the intention to be responsive and participate.
Yes, exactly. And it comes from wisdom.
Right.
You see the wholesome and the unwholesome. You know which is which. A lot of times we build up that passion, whether it's hatred or desire, even more likely hatred, as a sense of protection. Why are people fighting? They want power, they want possessions. And where does it lead? Where does it lead? That's always if we start to understand Dhamma and we start to understand the way the world actually is, then we know where it leads. And we can put it down like a hot coal. Yeah, beautiful examples. I'm going to go on to this short sutta about the aversion side.
You sure you didn't want to say anything, Adrian, after all? You sure?
Well, it was more in relation to maybe what Neil was saying, but I just remembered, I think it was you, Ayya Chittananda, that said before about enjoying the forest and the nature and stuff around the Vihara, but then remembering that it's not worth coming back for.
Yeah.
And that's a really good kind of reflection for tempering the desire, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like Matthew was saying, where you eat the peach, you enjoy the forest, you don't cling to it always being the same or even being there at all, or you're not going to suffer when it burns down or whatever.
No cling peaches.
No cling
No
peaches.
cling peaches, that's right, no cling. Free stone.
Cling free.
Cling free, free stone peaches. Yeah.
I'm sorry, was there anything in the chat that was a comment?
Well, earlier I think Ling was giving a concrete example that you asked for, and you didn't want to.
No, but we could look.
We might want to look
Yeah.
at that.
Let's check out Ling's example.
Yeah. Yeah, and then things since people been appreciating Matthew's input.
That's good.
Okay, let's
Oh,
make
that
this bigger. Yeah. So Ling says, because she can't talk right now, I was trying to make up with my son, so I agreed to take him to buy his wanted special notebook this morning. As a result, we missed our train. Craving definitely leads to suffering in such concrete examples.
Oh. Yep.
Yeah. Oops. Yeah, I can close
Sorry.
it. Oh, are you doing it? Okay.
Okay, I'm going to share this next short sutta. There we go. And then just scroll down to the next sutta.
Mm-hmm. That's the end, it looks like. Is that the end?
It's not going.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there we go. Oops. Oh, up. Oh no, down. Sorry. Down a little more. Okay, hatred. That's the one. So this is just an excerpt from the longer advice to Rahula in Majjhima Nikaya 62. And this is, when we look at hatred, we look at aversion. This is the Buddha's advice for developing the Brahma Viharas and a couple of other things. So he says, meditate on love, which this is Bhante Sujato's translation of metta. Meditate on metta. For when you meditate on metta, any ill will be given up. So, whether we look at the three poisons, greed, hatred, and delusion, or we call it desire, ill will, we call it ill will instead, or aversion. If we're meditating on loving kindness, that helps to give it up. It's another way of having that spiritual joy arise in us, spiritual happiness arise in us. The Buddhist told Rahula to meditate on compassion, because when you meditate on compassion, any cruelty will be given up. We meditate on mudita, rejoicing or appreciative joy, and then any discontent will be given up. So discontent also is a kind of the second class of the wanting to get rid of the hatred or aversion. We're not content. It's a negative. It's on the negative side. Meditating on equanimity. For when you meditate on equanimity, any repulsion will be given up. So feeling repulsed by the sight of someone or something. You know, when you're equanimous, even though you may know that what this person is doing or choosing is unwholesome, we have equanimity rather than repulsion. We're meditating on ugliness. So when you meditate on ugliness, any lust will be given up. And when we meditate on impermanence, and I think this is really interesting, when you meditate on impermanence, any conceit I am will be given up. And the conceit I am is one of the last fetters to fall away. There's a very beautiful sutta about a monk who's dying, who's confronted by his brother monks around what he knows and what he doesn't know, and they think he's enlightened because he knows that none of the 5 khandhas are self. And he's like, no, I know that the body and feeling and mental activity, or sankhara, which is a complicated term, but none of that, consciousness or perception, none of that is self. I know that, but I still have this kind of idea that I am. I haven't given that up yet. And it was interesting because when he's describing this to them, he talks about, where in the flower, where is the fragrance? It's like, even though you can't point to any part of the flower, the plant that has the fragrance is still there. He said, this idea that I am, that I exist, this is still there. And while he's explaining it, he becomes enlightened. Let's go of that conceit I am. It just falls away. So this meditation on impermanence is, the Buddha says, this is the way. So when you think of, well, how do I work with this aversion? How do we get from that place of, like our common pattern is you hear the debate and you're fired up or you're upset or you're obsessed. How do you get from there to, I can see what's happening, what's wholesome and unwholesome in this, and I'm responsive and I'm ready to help, to do something, but I'm not caught up in this fire, this feeling of passion, this feeling of desire and hatred. It's very interesting. So these are some of the methods. If we really develop those Brahma Viharas, then we can have that flooding the mind, any one of those flooding the mind at all times. The technology is not behaving properly. When have you experienced that before? Gonna have to do some work on the battery situation, I guess.
I am sometimes when I see yeah.
Sometimes when you see the downside, it causes aversion. Yes, we flip from one side to the other sometimes. So there's there can be the fine line between aversion and dispassion. I don't think there's such a fine line between aversion and dispassion. I think there is a fine line between aversion and indifference. But dispassion is a different feeling, because the way I see it is more like what Mayuro was describing. You're not caught up in it, the desire or the aversion, but you're aware. Your mindfulness is there. Your goodwill is there. You want to help. So I think that maybe the fine line would be between aversion and indifference.
Yeah, I like it. It's kind of like Adrienne brought up, like, I'm not coming back for that. It's not actually aversion to the forest or whatever, but it's definitely dispassion.
Yeah.
It's like, the liking is still there. The liking and disliking, like the liking part is still there, but there's not the passionate clinging. I'm not going to go like get a forestry degree or,
or just
whatever, and study all this stuff and really get excited about it in a way that's going to keep me coming back for that. And I don't want to come back for that.
Yeah, I know that feeling. So I was thinking, when you think about the forest, there's the drawbacks, do you want to be in a place where you constantly, there's spiders and wood rats and snakes and ticks and, there's all this stuff to deal with all the time. The forest is constantly being, there's this constant eating and being eaten, kind of happening in the forest. There's, your favorite tree will fall down and break or whatever, just don't have a favorite tree. But it's like, how much, do you want to deal with the forest stuff being carried into the cabin and all that? And it's like, but instead of going from the part you love to the part you hate and back and forth, it's that, you notice how you feel about it. And you can do it on the negative side too. Maybe there's some part of whatever it is that you experience, living in town, living in the forest, wherever you are, the part that you don't like, also don't come back for that. Don't come back for that feeling of, like, I know better and this should be better than this, or whatever that sense of self there. Or I really like this, but that, like you said, it's not that you fail to see or notice or experience the taste, the touch, the sight, but not letting that take root in us in a certain way. And it's just, I'm not going to come back for that. What do we have instead? It's that beautiful spiritual experience that's not sticky like the things of the world are. Neil?
You're reminding me of a story about Ajahn Sumedho when he was younger in a monastery. I wonder if you know the story. I appreciate, but I do not want. Do you know the story?
I do know the story. It was when a group of nurses came to the monastery to see Ajahn Chah. So there's all these, lovely young women in this group. And Ajahn Chah is kind of like, what did that do to your mind, Sumedho? And Ajahn Sumedho says, I like, but I don't want. Or like you said, I appreciate, but it's like, they're lovely and I don't want them, and when we can be coming from that place, or when we do want something, knowing why we want it, is this a wholesome desire? Because that wholesome desire needs to be there to do the practice, to kind of organize our life in a way that is actually beneficial. wanting the kutis to be built, but it doesn't have if we start to take ownership of it, then it has this stickiness, this felt sense of possession. When we are, acquiring things, then we're going to suffer. And the advantage to being monastic is, we really can't take ownership of any of that. It's like we do that for, the Sangha. Yeah, you live in a kuti. You're only supposed to think of this is the place I stay for the night, But in lay life too, how much can you not own the house that you're paying for? It's like, it's just a house. This is the deal. You have to put in your effort, your money to be able to live there. But there's nothing sure about it at all. Could be gone tomorrow. If we recognize that without going into negativity, it's like how to walk that line, like not falling into the negative, not reaching for the positive in terms of worldly things that are impermanent, that do have a drawback, that do have this no owner kind of reality. How do we walk that line? Well, we practice every aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path. Really, that's the answer. These three roots of suffering. And we're going to talk more about delusion later today. So we'll take that more into account probably after lunch. Yeah, Kashmir.
See, just wanted to share that if we look at the Paticcasamuppada, the different origination, it feels like there is no control over the feeling of pleasant, unpleasantness, and neutral. That happens. That just happens. That
surfaces. There are those parts that are just automatically, they fall like dominoes. They're just
But following that is the tanha, which is the craving. That is what you don't. So even if you feel unpleasant,
that's one of the breaking points right there.
So even if you feel unpleasant, we feel this is not okay, because that will surface. You cannot have control over what surfaces.
That's right.
Just you can control how you relate to that, and I think my struggle was I did not want to feel that discomfort.
Yes.
And that's what I was thinking is, I am not practicing okay because I'm feeling this negativity. But that is going to happen until you become an arhat.
It's a very important point. From what I understand, feeling still arises.
Yeah.
You just know it for what it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yes. It's true.
I always found that too high of a bar for myself, though, to break, to stop the chain between feeling and craving, because that's so instant and automatic for me. I feel like it's so fast. I have better luck between craving and clinging.
Yes, that's right.
Lower bar, more practical. Yeah, I can manage that, but it's so automatic. There's this feeling, and instantly there's ooh or ooh. You just can't always catch it fast enough and actually stop the craving one way or the other. That clearly right there for me.
You can see.
What do you do then to interfere with the clinging?
Yeah, you do the thing where you look at all the downsides, yeah. Oh, that's going to burn, that forest is going to burn down one day or whatever, my favorite tree did die, or at least crack off. And anyway,
her favorite tree.
My favorite tree.
Favorite.
That was probably my favorite.
It was a very nice tree.
Very interesting. Hanging out over the creek, a little elbow thing, and it cracked right at the elbow, and now it's just, sad. Anyway, good firewood, upside. Don't get negative. No. Anyway, yeah. Don't cling. Got it? Okay.
Neil?
Yeah, that got me thinking what a great way to practice the dealing with the step from feeling to craving is to go grocery shopping when you're hungry.
Yes.
Really.
And you have your list and you stick to your list.
Right. It ain't easy.
Funny. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll draw this part to a close. Another interesting concept. Hold on.
How can I not own the things I've paid for?
How can you not own the things you paid for?
Yeah,
you have to have a different relationship with money. Money's just that stuff that flows through your life, makes things possible, comes and goes. Yeah.
We do the same, like with our cooties and stuff. People are always like, "Oh, is that your cootie?" And I'm like, "It's the one I'm staying in." Yeah, sure. I put a lot of work into it, building it and whatever, but it's not really like mine, and nothing really is. I mean, even things I have from my life that I bought back in the day, it's still like, it's really mine.
Yeah.
It's a tricky, almost a mind game, but a very good one.
What can you really own?
Yeah, what can you really own? It's all going away anyway, Are you still going to want to own it when it's a rag in the trash? Really? Nah. Yeah.
So more on delusion leader.